While not quite as explosive as last week's episode, the season finale of The Boys is here, and today we are going to talk about this episode in depth. What the heck happened at the end there? Some incredible battles, awesome character moments, and the fact that it was just the cherry on top of an already fantastic season 2. I love this show. Can't wait to talk more about it. I will have another video today talking about my favorite moments from the season as a whole. And if you guys would like to see it, maybe we'll just theorize about what is going to happen in season 3 and talk about this potential casting. But we're going to save that for later. We're going to talk about episode 8 right now. And just kind of picking up the pieces from episode 7 after one of the craziest and most wild experiences I think any television watcher has had since maybe even the Red Wedding. Obviously, we had the death of Lamplighter killing himself in front of Huey. Queen Maeve giving Black Noir a candy bar because, the tree nut allergy thing, which is kind of scary. My brother has a tree nut allergy. And then, of course, the former CSO of Vought agreeing to testify. Everything's going to turn out well for our heroes until people's heads just start exploding. Jonah's head blows up. Many members of the court, their heads are blowing up. The character of Grace, she manages to escape along with the Senator Victoria, and we'll talk more about that with this episode, but most of them were not lucky at all. And that's where we open up with episode 8. As always, the episode opens with some sort of either a gag or an interesting moment. This one is a school safety video for students. This is Homelander and a few assistants, aka students, telling everyone how to arm themselves against a super villain attack. And we all had these local safety videos growing up, whether it was my school, where we had an officer come in and explain to us DARE, which is drug abuse resistance education. Don't do drugs, kids. Or exactly what we got in this episode, just an awkward video, and it's so funny just seeing Homelander, as he always does, just smile and wave, fit right into society, and then wreak havoc in the background. So in the meantime, the president is declaring a national emergency and wants Compound V in circulation, and that's when Grace says, hey, that's not a very good idea. They're kind of explaining how the country is scared, and why wouldn't the country be scared? All of this coming out. News about Vought. Later on in the episode, what happens with Stormfront. I would be terrified if I was living in this world, not being able to trust the Supes, and then not knowing who is actually going against the Seven. We're being told it's Starlight, but then we figure out later on that it is indeed Stormfront. And that's one of the things that I love about this show, is it's not only we're getting a look into it from their perspective, those who are a part of this, we can take a step back and approach it as someone who lives in this world and has to see all of this quote-unquote fake news, these fake events happening on TV, and the way that it rivals the world that we're living in right now. Obviously with the Stormfront semi-on-the-nose Nazi comparison with the white power antics that we saw at the beginning of episode 7, that continues here, except now in this episode, people actually figure out that she was at one point a Nazi, and she was at one point married to Vought. But again, we're going too far. Let's step back. So let's check in on the boys. The boys, they're getting ready to brawl. Huey, he says, I kind of want to go get another witness, but Frenchie and Billy, they're doing everything they can to prepare for A-Train. Now, Starlight, she is very confident that she knows somebody who has enough credibility. So she says, I need a little time to figure this out. Now, I think something that we're all wondering after the previous episode is, who did this? Who was involved with all of the exploding heads? Well, we finally get our answer at the end of the episode. But Homelander, he just doesn't know. You see in the video, he's as confused and baffled as everyone else. And it's crazy because he's always the guy that is one step ahead of everyone else. Well, this time, their heads were one step ahead. Sorry. They have a little discussion. Stormfront is saying, listen, we have to take this and run with it. We have to make it as good as we possibly can. And that's when we cut back to Starlight and Billy, who are honestly running out of ideas at this point. We see the despair in their faces. We see the curiosity as to, okay, what are we going to do next? Now we know who Starlight is about to approach. We see her approach Queen Maeve, who is at the bottom, or really the lowest point she's ever been at after her breakup, and she just refuses to be on board with Starlight and Huey. She says, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to testify. She's sick and tired of this entire thing. Now, the ongoing through line with Homelander and Billy the Butcher is fascinating to me because they're actually extremely similar to one another, and you all know this. You know as well as I have. They like to be one step ahead. They think that they're in charge of everything. They think they can get away with everything, like we see in one of the final shots of this episode when Homelander's, up doing his thing on the statue. We'll get to that. But each of them also has something deep down inside of them that they do not want to reveal to anyone. We saw Billy did not want to reveal to his father. Now, Homelander is a bit different with his son. He is coming around, but he's extremely defensive, and he knows that he can get away with anything. And that's exactly what happened. They turned him against his mother, they took him away, and now they're just trying to be a family with him, and they're in a restaurant enjoying a meal when everyone's bursting in, asking for selfies and wanting autographs, and we see young Ryan. Well, he doesn't know what to think because he's never been in a situation remotely similar to this, so he begins to panic, as pretty much anyone with anxiety would, or anyone that's never been in the world before. And that's when he does something. He asks for his mother. Now, we knew this would come eventually because being separated for someone, even when you say, oh, I hate you, of course he doesn't hate his mother. His mother has done everything for him at this point, and I believe he started to realize that, and he wanted to see his mom. So that's when Homelander flies off, and then we get the moment between Starlight, A-Train, Huey, when A-Train says, listen, I want back in, and my only way back in is if I give you this dirt that would destroy anyone. I'm going to give it to you on Stormfront. So that's when they see the reveal of who Stormfront really is. Now, we know who she is at this point, and at this point, she is playing the system. She is systematically evil. She's the definition of evil, maybe even more so than Homelander to a degree, but Homelander really proves how evil he is a little bit later. Now, here's when we get a scene that really shows Billy's true colors on the outside, but on the inside, we see a bit of a revelation a tiny bit later. Billy has this little meeting with Edgar where he describes, I want Becca to stay with me. We're going to take the boy away from Homelander, but we are going to put him somewhere safe that is not with us, essentially tearing the boy apart from his mother, in which neither of them would like that, especially Becca, who is very firm in her stance of, I want to be the mother to my son, and I want to be there for him. But then we see Billy's goodness start to come out. Even though he just made an agreement with Edgar, he tells Becca, no, we're going to go save your son. We're going to bring him back, and we're going to allow him to be with Becca, which is what everyone wants at the end of the day. Happy ending, right? So the boys then use a disruptor, and this scene harkened back extremely to X-Men 2 for me, when Charles Xavier sends out the signal that essentially starts killing all of the mutants. They hear the noise, they're all holding their ears. Well, that's what we see here. We see all of the soups not being able to get away from that sound. And once we get Ryan out, this is when we get the extremely emotional scene between Becca and Billy, where we truly see how much they love each other, that they're willing to do anything. This is the relationship that has been built up through 2 seasons, and this essentially is the culmination, because what happens to her a little bit later, and it was a beautiful thing to see. You really do see and feel that. And then immediately Stormfront comes in, throws the car. I thought people were dead. I knew the kid was okay, but I'm like, where's mother's milk? Is Becca okay? Can we see? Are they good? Somehow they're fine. But that's when it happens. The huge fight between our soups. It is awesome. It's also all females, which I thought was pretty cool. Man, one of the best fight scenes of the entire 2-season run so far. After Stormfront's doing some name-calling towards Starlight, Kimiko smirks, laughs, has this smile on her face. We get that 3-way battle, and then Queen Maeve turns up at the last possible second, and they're literally just beating her on the ground, calling her a Nazi bitch, and it was crazy, but not as crazy as what is about to happen. Because what happens next, I believe, is just as shocking and visually impactful as the exploding head scene in episode 7. Okay, because in this scene, we see young Ryan finally use his powers to protect his mother as he completely obliterates Stormfront. And I mean smokes her, fries her, chars her up, serves her on a delicious platter. It's a 3-course meal with mashed potatoes and biscuits. No, that's not true, but she is very much burned to death. So unless Emperor Palpatine floats in and says, "Still alive," she's a goner. But Becca was also injured in the battle. Now, it was much less of a terrifying injury, but it was enough to essentially take her out with Stormfront. She was bleeding through the neck. That was the end of that. And we got a tragic scene between Billy and Becca, where Becca asks Billy to keep Ryan safe. Now, he's pissed, and he's about to pull out the weapon and try to beat Billy senseless, even though I don't know if he'd win that battle. But in an epic shot, down comes a blood-stained Homelander who is devastated because of what happened to Stormfront, who's just sitting there just talking German or whatever. I don't know what she's saying. She's saying something. But B, really pissed off at both Billy and the child, who takes a couple of steps to his right and ends up right behind, who is now much more of a father figure than the evil Homelander. And this is the standoff that I believe we were all waiting on. But we all know who's going to win this battle. Fortunately for Billy, Queen Maeve shows up with the evidence of that infamous plane scene from Season 1, where they essentially let everyone on that plane die. And she says, if you take me out, if you take him out, if you hurt that child, this goes out to the world. Another trope that we have seen play out in many superhero movies and many spy movies prior to this. So they're taking elements from, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DC Universe, different genres, variations of blockbusters, but they're turning them on their heads and they're playing with them in a way where they've established these interesting characters that really, really works. And I thought this episode was fabulous up until this point, and this point was where I really sat back and said, man, they knocked this ending out of the park. From the great battle scene to the emotional death of Becca, we knew someone had to die. And Homelander, he's just faced with this choice, and he knows exactly what he has to do. He either loses his reputation, which he is not willing to lose, or he loses a bit of his humility with the group, and that's the route he ends up going. Homelander walks away, they have a press conference, and essentially everything is okay. Starlight was good, Stormfront was bad, since people are memeing about her being a Nazi. You can't have that on the team, and she's dead. Is she dead? We never actually saw that she was dead. We just saw her charred. Who knows? Palpatine. You around here somewhere? Oh, but we're not done. Something we haven't even talked about are the scenes, the exchanges between the Deep and A-Train. Not as heavily focused in this episode, so that's the reason. But it turns out A-Train, because of what he did, providing that evidence, is now in the Deep, is still out, not a part of the Seven after everything he went through in this season. The poor guy, but A-Train has slowly worked his way back in, so doing what he did, approaching Starlight and Huey with that evidence, paid off, and he is back. We get an intimate moment between Huey and Starlight. That was great. We now know that they're going to be together, but we don't know how the group is going to work after this. Billy gives Ryan a necklace that belonged to his mother, told him that it's going to make him strong, and it turns out that Ryan is not going to stay with Billy for the time being. They're going to try to find him somewhere safe to stay. As I said earlier, we see Homelander doing his thing, just shouting out, "I can do whatever I want," because he doesn't give an F. He's a psychopath. So all of this happened, and we still haven't answered the question, how did the heads explode at the end of episode 7? So we get an interesting scene that felt kind of random at first. The scene takes place in the office of the leader of the Church of the Collective, who is talking to this congresswoman. Victoria Neuman is her name, and he's congratulating her. He's saying, listen, can we expedite the taxes of the church? She says, of course. And then his head blows up, and we're all sitting back going, what? Okay, who's blowing up the heads? Well, it turns out she was the one, because we saw in that scene that, she was just so happening to survive. Multiple people survived, but there was something about the camera that lingered on her all throughout, but I didn't think anything of it. So it turns out she is the one that was causing this to happen. She has powers. Huey is now working under Congresswoman Victoria. So essentially, Huey just kind of gives himself over to who looks to be the next major supervillain. Now, we know she's not the only supervillain, quote-unquote, cast for the next season, but they are setting her up to be a major player in Season 3. So it's nice that we got the question answered of how did that crazy scene happen in Episode 7, but now we ask ourselves, what is the significance of this Congresswoman? So this is interesting. In the comics, we have the character of Victor instead of Victoria with the same last name. Now, he is the former CEO of Vought and the Vice President of the United States in the comic books. He's described as simple-minded but easy to manipulate. So clearly, we have a completely different spin on the character, A, since she is now a female instead of a male, and B, it seems like she is behind the scenes pulling strings, but what kinds of strings is she pulling? Now, it is possible that she is some sort of double agent, clearly having a bit of an affinity for Huey. There is something there that she is allowing him to come in and be under her wing of sorts. We do know that Vought likes to profit from soups. We know that they don't want the leaders of the Seven taking any sort of control. So clearly she kept the trial from happening, but now she is in a position where she has much more of an influence over the soups. And we see, as we get that zoom out at the end there, we see all of these different signs: resist Vought, for the people. Again, playing on modern politics, and this entire show is basically a satire of what's going on in the world, other superhero movies and shows, properties, and there are Easter eggs galore. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you guys would like to see more from me, whether it is focusing in on those Easter eggs, whether it is talking about my favorite moments, or even trying to predict what is going to happen in Season 3, let me know. I would love to talk more about The Boys, one of my favorite things, TV shows or movies that I have seen this year, and I'm so glad you guys were able to finally watch it. Check out my non-spoiler review. I was able to watch the season early about a month ago. I appreciate it. Again, stay tuned because later on today, The Haunting of Bly Manor, I will be talking spoilers, talking about the ending. You're the best. Gonna try to get over that ending. Kind of scarred me.